Tyros X-Air, we're still listening. The communication is it's failing. If anyone please hear static, then nothing. The last transmission from Colony Tyros X did not end. It vanished, not with screams, not with panic, but with the kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident. A chosen silence. At first, it was believed to be an equipment failure. The colony was young, just 3 years into habitation on Tyros, a rocky giant orbiting an aging star on the edge of Sector Theta 5. Over 2,000 people lived there, scientists, engineers, entire families. And then, they no longer did. No distress calls, no explosions, no sign of evacuation. Just an abrupt cut, as if sound itself had been switched off from the universe. But there was more. Monitoring satellites registered that oxygen in the colony still circulated. Life support systems were active, but there were no voices, no messages, no language, a deep, continuous silence. Not technical, sensorial. That was when the Federation dispatched an autonomous probe equipped with advanced listening protocols. What it found was even more alarming. The probe's cameras showed people walking, moving normally, breathing, but not speaking, not making any sound at all. Mouths open, gestures faltering, desperate expressions trying to articulate the impossible. Words would not come out. No screams, no crying, not even the sound of wind around the colony. When the probe's feed reached its end, a final image remained frozen. A woman sitting at a terminal, eyes wide open, her hand trembling over the keyboard, typing random sequences. Nothing made sense until a hidden message was decoded in the final frames. Language is not failing. It is being rejected. And at that moment, deep within the planet Tyros, something began to listen. The probe sent to Tyros X had fulfilled its mission. It transmitted the silence. But within the audio bands, in the spaces between noise, something subtle emerged. A pulse. It wasn't sound. It was brainwave frequency. Earth's neuroscientists, analyzing the data, found a rhythmic curve matching the electrical activity of the human temporal cortex. It didn't come from a transmitter. It didn't come from the colony. It came from the planet itself. Tyros was emitting something directly to the nervous system, a frequency that didn't need to be heard to be absorbed. It vibrated within the gaps between senses, infiltrating like a thought not yet thought, just installed. And with it came the first side effects. Technicians monitoring the signals began to misspell simple words. Researchers swapped letters, stuttered entire sentences. Some forgot their own names mid-conversation. It was as if language was being dismantled. From the inside out, analyses revealed a pattern. The frequency seemed to adapt to each brain it encountered. Like a smart virus, it learned. And in learning, it reprogrammed. Soon, cognitive voids began to appear. Those affected showed no physical injuries, but blank spaces in the mind, memories with gaps, words that no longer made sense, concepts slipping away before they could be grasped. And one terrifying detail: those most exposed to the frequency reported a sensation of presence when trying to sleep, as if something was watching them. From within. It was a language without sound, a message without words, a presence expressed through what was not said. Earth silenced its radars. The orders were clear. Do not listen anymore. Do not capture anymore. Do not let the silence speak to us. But perhaps it was already too late. What started on Tyros X did not stay on Tyros. The frequency needed no cables, no traditional waves or transmitters. It traveled by another medium, the collective consciousness. Days after the planet's signal was blocked, the first linguistic collapses outside the quarantine zone began. A rescue mission pilot mumbled incoherent sounds upon landing at the Copernicus Delta lunar base. A researcher who merely watched the Tyros probe footage lost the ability to write. In Marshallese colony schools, children began drawing spirals on notebooks instead of words. It was not physical contagion. It was semantic. Something in the symbols, something in the structure of what had been transmitted even visually seemed to carry a cognitive vector. Not that language was being forgotten, but replaced. Experts named it the meaning disease, but it didn't kill. It erased connections slowly, silently, until the affected simply stopped trying. First went names, then objects, then the very idea of self, and most disturbingly, all retained full awareness. They knew they were disappearing, but could no longer say it. But one alarming case was an artist on Jupiter Prime. He recorded a video before collapsing. The video had no sound, no clear image, just a sequence of gestures. And eyes pleading for something that could no longer be named. At this point, the Solar Consortium leaders made a radical decision. Language is the vector. Sound, symbol, gaze. The very attempt to understand allows its expansion. Hundreds of servers were disconnected, books archived in sealed vaults. Communication between sectors was reduced to minimums, short phrases, binary codes. But the silence did not retreat. It adapted. Unlike an originless echo, it continued to grow. Wherever someone tried to understand. When all falls silent, those who never spoke become the only ones who still can. That's how they found her, born in the Kepler-31 orbital colony, without voice, without hearing, and with no prior exposure to spoken language. The 10-year-old girl was overlooked by the initial waves of collapse. She didn't read, she didn't speak, she didn't write, but she understood. It began with drawings, circular patterns, spiral structures, symbols linguists could not translate, but which caused inexplicable chills in those who looked at them for too long. Then came the gestures, repeated sequences of movement that, according to body language experts, belonged to no known culture. They were intuitive, universal, pre-linguistic. The child wasn't just immune, she seemed connected. Around her, the silence did not cause fear, it caused response. Others began showing similar patterns. Catatonic patients briefly returned to consciousness when exposed to the girl's drawings. Some smiled, others wept without knowing why, but all repeated the same thing before slipping back into the void. She hears what has no sound, she understands what cannot be said. She's the translation. The neuroscience team tried to map her brain activity. The graph showed something unprecedented. Inactive regions of the human brain were lighting up. Parts of the mind never used, cognitive reserves for a language never taught. That's when they realized the silence was not an error. It was an evolution, a new form of communication, deeper, more primitive, or perhaps more advanced. The girl looked at everyone with serenity, and in a completely silent room, she finally left her only message, drawn on the glass. We are learning to hear ... What the universe has tried to say since the beginning. Philosophers called it the structural collapse of the symbolic, but those on the front lines had another name for it. The silencing. The collapse spread like a formless virus, a field of distortion that didn't need to be physically present. It was enough for you to try to understand what was happening. In Ganymede's Colony 3, an even more radical phenomenon was recorded. Newborns no longer responded to auditory stimuli. They didn't vocalize, and yet they seemed to communicate with each other through long gazes, subtle movements, as if they already knew sound was irrelevant. Humanity watched the collapse of the greatest pillar of its civilization, language as the structure of reality, and at the center of it all, the Tyros monolith continued to pulse. It didn't emit signals. It didn't demand attention. It simply ... existed, and its existence was rewriting the rules. Communication with it was not done through words, nor through mathematics. It was done through absence, through gaps, through silence. And the more humans tried to resist, the more the universe seemed to echo back the same message. Words were merely an evolutionary accident. Now it is time to return to the essential. To what precedes sound, to what listens without asking.